Good morning, friends. Um, so this is my second time attempting to record um, myself, I guess, speaking about some observations and reflections that I had about the meeting that we had yesterday with Shifu and the group. So instead of kind of getting just lost in my thoughts, I figured it would be good to just come on here and see if I'm able to, I guess talk any of it out, and then with hopes, of course, of being able to share it with everybody. So that's what I'm doing. So yesterday the talk was mostly in Chinese, and I did use a translator app, but I'm not sure that I understood everything in detail. But I did kind of, I think I got like at least two of the main points I think that Shifu was discussing. Sun is right in my eyes, so, but I think, so the things that stood out to me were, one, the topic of time, so past, present, future, and then to like trauma. So those are kind of like the big things that have been just like floating around and that I've been kind of like reflecting on since yesterday. And these are kind of big topics, I feel like. So I do have like my own, or just as everybody does, I'm sure, like, but I have my own personal experience with trauma and how it impacted me personally, and how I've dealt with it, and how I've kind of changed my OS, I guess, in some ways, and how it still affects me. So it's kind of, there's a lot of pieces to it. And I know when I shared my first video, one of the things that I said at some point throughout that video was, it was just saying that there are times where I still feel like the old like habits of feeling shame, or like feeling embarrassed or stupid, or like I don't belong. And in that video I said that, when that happens, what I do is, I feel where that's coming from in the body. I feel like the tie to it in the body. And then I can relax it and let it go and come back to this moment. And I mentioned that those are just thoughts. They're not reality. You can come back. Like that's what I do. However, that's not how it always was. And it's not always easy still, even now. There's times where, I'll still get stuck in it and forget that it's thoughts. And when that happens, for one, it's the old OS that's kind of triggered and replaying, and then number two, it is directly like tied to the whole like past, present, future thing, because if I get into like if something happens that causes me to kind of get stuck in one of those old emotions, and if I am not able to like remember that it's just a past memory, it's not like what's happening now. What happens is I identify with it. I identify as who I felt like I was during that time. Even it happens just subconsciously. It's not necessarily like, it's not something I want to happen, but sometimes it just happens where it's just like it just can just overtake, like, oh, like if I did something embarrassing, like, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I did that. And and it can go on, and it can really make me feel that way, like there's something wrong with me. And you know and when that happens, when it's in that kind of like spiral where I feel so stuck in it and so identified as that, um, those memories are keeping me in the past. So instead of being present, so instead of, like I said, just letting go and coming back here, when those memories are triggered, and when I'm in a loop of feeling identified as that, those memories are what is taking main focus, even though it's happening now in the present moment. So it's like in this moment, I'm thinking like I'm using that old OS, and that's who I feel like I am. And when that happens, it does impact the future, because in this moment, while I'm thinking I'm this awful person or I'm not worthy or whatever it is, my choices reflect that. And when your choices in the present reflect something from the past, then your future carries it, if that makes sense. So if I'm continuously, feeling less than, then it's likely that I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not going to try new things. I'm not going to want to risk, exposing myself to feel worse. And I know that for me, it's very difficult to kind of like get out of that sometimes. And it took me, I'm 45, it took me 43, 42 years, something like that, to get to the point where I could even start to see it as like a something that happened from the past, and not who I am. So I guess there's just so much that I feel like that I, looking back, that I would like to share. It's just it's hard to know where to start, I guess. So my experience, I'm just going to talk about my own experience with trauma. Obviously, I don't know how everybody else feels, or like what they've been through. But I think that my experience with trauma, I say it like that because it's just a label that we're given to, like a set of things that happened in life and then caused a response. But so what the trauma that shaped me and kind of like programmed my OS is from childhood. So it was basically what I learned, the patterns that I learned. And when I look back at it now, it feels kind of weird, because I see this trauma as also as like an interconnection. Definitely not as pleasant of one as like like the Tai Chi, breathing and feeling connected. It doesn't feel like that, but it does, like there is like a direct experience of interconnection when I kind of reflect on trauma in general, because it's shaped from like circumstances. For me, it came a lot from like my parents and my family, and and it's just kind of interesting to see how all of that kind of connects together. And I don't say it in a bad way. You know, we all had, my parents had their things going on too, and they had their own trauma that caused them to be how they were. So it's kind of like now where I am, I can see it kind of more as just like just an ongoing cycle that happened to, I mean, honestly, it just happened to wire my brain in a particular way. And I think that's also kind of interesting to think about as well, and helpful to think about as well. This body is you know, there's not like a separate alley in here, that as a tiny little girl says like okay, now now you have to be perfect, in order to be safe here. Like, okay, so you have to do this, and then there's not like an alley in here that says, like, oh, you got in trouble or you did something bad, so that's who you are. What actually happens is it's the body. It's as a little girl, when I was scared, what would likely happen, my body tenses up, and my nervous system feels that, and the brain automatically like wires itself. So that's how it programs. It rewires itself outside. It wires itself based on what's happening, and it's wiring for survival. So honestly, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. Like, there's some pretty horrendous stuff that people, it's going to make me tear up, but that people are able to get through. And it's because of that trauma, that our operating systems wired that way. And unfortunately, like, especially, I think, for me, especially if it's like from childhood, and it's something that's repeated, that wiring is very deep, and it's very like, it gets to be very solid feeling. And it's not like, as you grow up and you get older, it's like, it's not just like all of a sudden you go from being like a scared child who needs protection, and so that, brain wires for that survival. It's not like you just go from that to an adult who is like perfect and healed and everything is great. You still carry all those patterns. So if they're not like seen, and if they're not like worked through, then those patterns continue, all of it, like the feelings in the body that trigger the response in the brain, and the survival strategies, and what our ego calls ourselves. So all these stories that come up, that are based on things that needed to protect us, those things still remain when we get older. That's at least that's been my experience. And it's again, like I said, it hasn't been easy to notice these things and to rewire them. It has taken for me, honestly, it's taken, like, I've had therapists that have been just so loving, and have listened to the things that I've told them from stories of my childhood, and then and even I didn't realize at the time, but stories of things I did that made me feel like a bad person, that I wasn't kind of putting together with stemming from my old operating system. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, for me, feeling safe and having someone like hold my story compassionately, that's what allows that trauma to finally start to be able to heal. Like, that's what allows the true self, to be able to recognize what's happened and how it affects, us, or me. And still, even with that, it's not always easy. So even if you have somebody who is holding your story and not judging you, and telling you like you're okay, and all of these things, and having like such like love and compassion, it's really great. But what I've experienced is that like you have to have that for yourself too. You can't make the changes unless you are being very compassionate, like within. So because sorry, this is a very emotional topic because it brings up just a lot of memories, and yeah, and those memories get triggered in the body. So in the moment, I think like the beginning of kind of practicing self-compassion, and being able to hold like trauma or stories that I have about myself, or that you may have about yourself. It takes practice as well. It took me a lot of, it still is taking me a lot of practice. And it takes being able to, in the moment, recognize what's happening, and then to be able to, step in some way, step out of it and do something different. And now at this point, when it happens, I feel like I'm extremely grateful to be able to recognize it, and then feel it in my body, and then to be able to let it go as a thought, because again, that is what it is. It's just a thought. It's not who you are. It's not who I am. These are just thoughts that get stuck. So now at this point, I can like remember that very pretty easily, I guess. But that's not how it always was. So back before, I remember I spent a lot of time like journaling and writing things, and kind of like trying to understand and get through, and and I guess in the earliest days, as I was going, kind of like first starting on that journey of understanding like how the impact of trauma and how it kind of wired me for survival, I was not able to feel in my body. I had no idea like the connections that it had. I as I mentioned before, I didn't know what it meant to like turn inwards. And on the very rare occasion where in therapy, if I was told to feel to focus inward and to feel something, and if I happened to feel it, I remember just feeling such a victory, like, oh, I felt something, but it didn't last, and it wasn't something that I could come back to on my own. So it wasn't, back in those earlier days, it wasn't something that I guess like when I was just kind of on my own that I was able to do. So the things that I started doing were finding beauty, or finding things that like made me happy, little micro things. It feels micro, like back then they felt micro, they felt small and insignificant. Now they feel big, and it's still kind of like, I still do this to this day. It just happens automatically. It's not really, it's not like something that I have to like focus to do now. But it's just things like look outside and see something beautiful. Find like a beautiful flower, or listen to the sound of the birds, and just enjoy that for a moment. Or even when I was like the most sad, I remember sometimes my cat would come sit on my lap, and just feeling her fur and listening to her purr. That would bring me like a glimpse of feeling happy, or feeling like just relieving that, those feelings of like whatever it was that were triggered by the trauma at the time. And I think like those things just kind of add up over and over again. And then, for me, eventually I was able to process, I think, the trauma in a different way. I met just a wonderful mentor who was able to help walk me back through the trauma that I experienced. And instead of just seeing it like knowing that it happened, because even years ago I knew what happened, but it wasn't like I never went back through it as an adult, if that makes sense. So what I ended up doing is basically like feeling some of that trauma, experiencing it again, but almost like seeing it, like seeing that little girl and feeling that little girl, but as an adult, as like a caring, adult. And when I did that, I think that's kind of what really like allowed me to realize and to like feel and understand more of like what happened. So that interconnection thing that I talked about at the beginning, I think that was kind of when that started. So really being able to let go of the burden. Like that little girl didn't she didn't deserve to have some of those things happen, and now like I am an adult and I can take care of myself, and I can also treat others with a lot of love, and and I can see and understand that that many of us, probably the majority of us, have been through things, very traumatic things that have caused pain, and that's what causes us to act the way that we do, in the ways that we don't like, or the things that we want to change, and if I see somebody else acting in a certain way, or feeling hurt, or really anything, it's much easier to have a lot of compassion for that person and hold that person, because kind of, maybe not exactly, but you have an idea of what they might be going through. So yeah, I'm not really sure what else to say about that. I guess just that for my experience, my trauma wasn't like, there's plenty of people who have had, much more severe trauma than what I experienced, but it was enough to where it wired my brain for survival in a certain way, which caused me some pain and struggling throughout my life. And when that pain and struggling is activated and believed, that is what keeps us stuck. So that's why in the present moment, we're holding on to the past and again projecting that into the future. So yeah, I guess that's all. I think this is just something that I still continue to work on to this day, and you know, if anyone watches this, and if you're going through something similar, or if this resonated in any way, you know, I just know that I am sending my love to you, and that it is, you know, you're not that person. You're not something solid. You're not bad. You're not broken. You're not stupid. You're not, you know, undeserving. You're not. There's nothing wrong with you. And I hope that you know, if you're struggling and if this is difficult, that you can just, you know, feel the love, and one day understand very deeply that this is not who you are. This is just survival mechanism. So yes, that's all. And again, Shifu's teachings clearly resonated very deeply for me, and I don't even know if I caught everything that was kind of talked about, but I just wanted to share, and again, like, just let everybody know that I just resonate so deeply with you all, and I truly appreciate you know, being with the group and getting to know everybody. So with that said, I am going to I'm going to end this, and then I'm going to go and take care of myself and do a little bit of meditation. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. Please be gentle with yourself, as I also intend to do, and know that you're loved, and look for something beautiful today too. So, okay, bye everybody.